have you ever considered that deviations from heterosexual sexual preferences and deviations from cisgender gender identification is not due to spiritual and moral depravity, not due to demonic influence? It's due to an increasingly broken reincarnation process. I know quite a few people who are very troubled with the LGBTQ plus movement. I see a lot of energy focused on response and resistance, a lot of condemnation based on religious beliefs, a lot of keep away the others that are not like me, and they're handling this group from the perspective of someone who thinks they have a better understanding of the situation spiritually than the people who are actually living these experiences. And I personally feel that all these things have elicited a very strong reaction from people outside of the LGBTQ community, which I would argue is pretty far from love. Now, I'm not here to ask anyone to change their mind, to shame them, or condemn them for whatever their thoughts or their beliefs are. I'd simply like to ask you one question. What if we've been deceived to replace love with hate? Many believe that God would not create something contradictory to its own intent. And the Abrahamic scriptures do say that these lifestyles are outside of God's intent. I agree. Nope. Wait for it. I agree that the Creator would not create something outside of its intent. I also don't believe that the creation, can become something other than what the Creator wants or would allow. If that were so, that means the creature is more powerful than the Creator. So these people are not a mistake or a deviation, because I don't believe that the creature can become something other than what was intended at creation. Now, this further settles in my mind that the scriptures do not give you accurate insight into the thought processes, the mind, or the desires of the Creator. It gives you insight into a thought process of an evil group of entities who manage the human project, wanting us to reproduce like livestock, to increase the work we could do, and to increase the benefit and the resources going back to that group. We're talking about a group that always benefits. The more divided mankind is, looking at differences from one another and using those differences to fuel hatred, this tyrannical, evil, malicious group benefits when those kind of divisions thrive and are well. That's the mindset we were given insight to, not that of the Creator. You're seeing insight into the mind of entities who find continual benefit in pitting humanity against itself. The Creator is love, all love, only love. For me, that translates to finding as many ways and opportunities as possible to love people as a way of communing with the loving Creator that I believe is the source of all love. Whenever I see words or actions that are said to be rooted in love, but are not things I would do, say, or want for my children, I immediately reject it. I don't care what institutional religion or any book says otherwise about how I should define love. I find that the definition of love I hold in my being is very plain and very straightforward. I, for one, will not be forced to accept some definition of love that I find non-compatible with my understanding of the word. And whenever I feel like I'm operating outside of love, which, if I'm being honest, is quite often, I'm still learning, I question what is driving my behaviors at that time. Yes, Abrahamic religions have some very strict and very harsh scriptures about anything not heterosexual. And while it's not explicitly mentioned, those same passages are weaponized against transgender persons as well. Now, it mentions the death penalty, it being an abomination, an immoral lifestyle, etc. And those passages get a lot of airplay already, so I'm not going to present them here. Those passages do not drive a love response. Therefore, I do not believe they are words from the Creator. That's just me personally. But consider the outcome and the reaction of those who read and believe these words. Now, I'm just asking Christians to take a moment to reflect, honestly. What do you feel when you read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? Now, I can't force anyone else, but I have to be transparent. I've mentioned before that I was determined to be a good soldier in the Christian army, and as a minister, I was a soldier carrying out orders no matter who got offended or hurt along the way. Now, while it wasn't my blatant intention to harm anyone, we were taught to not let it stop you from telling the truth, and the hurt was almost inevitable. During that time, I felt no sympathy for the victims of Sodom and Gomorrah, no more than I did the Israelites who made the golden calf, or those who were killed after complaining about the manna, or the man who picked up sticks on the Sabbath day, or any of the other 3 million humans whose deaths can be attributed to God's intervention and punishment as a reaction to sin. And that lack of sympathy is the whole point. That indifference to the loss of those human lives is not rooted in the kind of love I believe in these days. Now, if you're interested, my character assassination series, which I'll link right here, deals with my reasoning behind this even more. Another moment of honest introspection. The rampant sexual behavior of many 20 and 30-somethings is fairly common. But ultimately, most of them settle down and find someone that they love and want to spend the rest of their lives with. It's really not different for non-heterosexuals or transgendered people. But that judgment of immoral sexuality does not persist once heterosexual or cisgendered people settle down with a life partner, as it often does for others. So think past the wild sexual behaviors of many 20 and 30-somethings and picture that person having matured, picking a partner that they love and commit to spending the rest of their lives with. That is ideally speaking. Even heterosexuals have a high divorce rate, right? We know that happens. But ideally speaking. Now at that point, regardless of the sexual preference or gender aspect of it, the person's relationships are less likely to be based on wanderlust, but on true love, devotion, and commitment. If these passages lead us to hate someone because of who they choose to love, think about that. If these passages lead us to hate someone because of who they choose to love, and God is all and only love, I had to ask myself, where does this mindset come from? And I think we need to work towards being a little less concerned with what goes on in the bedroom or sex lives of other people. It doesn't matter what you would do in their shoes. You have your own shoes to walk in. If a random person has found another person who makes them feel happy and loved and satisfied and fulfilled in this life, what do I gain from wanting that person to be denied their happiness? Why would I be so invested in getting someone to change something about themselves that you're not willing to change about you, or to hear anyone else's opinion on it for that matter? I don't think I need to be concerned with the sexual preferences of anyone other than my partner and mine. But I'm also very well aware of the common complaint that these lifestyles are not being kept to the people who live them. They're being broadcasted quite frequently in entertainment media these days. Well, I'll address that part before we close. But be mindful, these people probably feel the same way every time they've had to watch an intimate scene on television between hetero and cisgender people. Think about that. During my time in ministry, I once harbored the same idea. It's not possible that people are just born homosexual or with the desire to change their gender assignment. That is until I had someone of a different race explain to me that they didn't believe I could experience racism in 21st century America after an Obama presidency, or another that I had to be either Republican or Democrat, that there's no way to have things I agree with and disagree with within both parties without choosing to align to one or the other. How could these people who were not in my skin tell me what I was experiencing while I was in it? And it was at that point that I realized how stubborn I was being by not accepting someone telling me what traits they are born with. As our work to elevate the consciousness of mankind on this planet continues to take effect, the third density, veil of forgetfulness, will continue to thin. That means that the lost memories of past lives will continue to bleed over into this life as the veil thins, more than they were able to when the veil was at its strongest point. It's going to become easier for the sexual preferences and the gender memory that a soul may carry from a previous life in a different biological container to spill over into this new incarnation. I have to admit, if the smallest part of my present day masculine gender or sexual attraction to females were to remain or be remembered in a subsequent reincarnation as a female, I would probably be a very masculine lesbian, or at the very least, a very asexual woman with no interest in entering into a sexual relationship with a male. When you consider the suicide rates of people pre and post-op, the pain and the torture some people are willing to endure just to feel comfortable in their own skin, this explanation makes much more sense than people conspiring to make you feel uncomfortable or upset, or just to rebel against God. Now let's be clear. I'm not talking about those losers who claim to have undergone surgery just to be perverts and get into a restroom of a different gender, or to gain an unfair advantage in sports, or to satisfy other malicious intentions. I'm not talking about those people. It's also not to ignore a percentage of people who I believe have their sexual preferences set based on what is imprinted on them as their first sexual experience in this life. And unfortunately, sometimes that first experience comes at the hand of a malicious, predatory adult scumbag. So if you're about that soul work, that light work, wanderer work, helping people restore their connection to source, helping people see and live the real love of the real creator, whatever you want to call it, that means that you're about thinning the veil. And if you're about thinning the veil, then people's memories from past lives will bleed over as a result of thinning the veil. And people feeling like they're in the wrong body, or feeling an attraction to the gender they were attracted to in a different body in a past life, will continue to spill over because the veil isn't as strong anymore. Our awakening, our increased awareness is thinning the veil, is making it less effective, and this is going to continue to happen. And we should be embracing and empathetic towards these souls, as this is part of the effect of light workers. Now, perhaps this knowledge can provide some alternatives to the surgical solutions, which today seems to not quell the discomfort these people are feeling. I'll also toss in that the law of one does mention that these behaviors emerge as a response to the planet's overpopulation and the need to slow down reproduction. So before closing, I'd also like to address what's been identified as an overcorrection in entertainment. There is not only an increase in LGBTQ plus specific programming, but it's increasingly rare that you see any programming without it. The more difficulty hetero and cisgender people have in finding programming without homosexual or transgender elements, the more they feel threatened and like this community is overreaching or aggressively trying to erase anyone not like them. We should acknowledge that overcorrection is typically the result of judgment, hatred, ostracization, and discrimination over a long period of time. When a sympathetic ear is finally caught, the discriminated group takes every opportunity they can to attempt to normalize themselves in a bid to gain the acceptance they have so long been denied. Overcorrection happens when people feel another opportunity may not come for them to have a shot at making their identity acceptable. I somewhat agree. There has been a bit of an overcorrection in the entertainment media, but the way to slow the overcorrection is to see and treat people as people. I can say as an African American, I feel affirmative action programs were appropriate in the civil rights era, but I do think they need to be slightly revised and updated. While I feel it is a bit of an overcorrection in 2023, I also don't feel it can be done away with while the reasons it was passed in the 1960s are still present today. Efforts need to be made to level the funding gap in education for minority communities, ensure appropriate and equal education methods, then institute blind conditions where a candidate can be evaluated for a job or admission into an institution of higher education purely based on merit, because this country has done very little to prevent racist individuals from holding these positions of power. Again, as an African American, I feel it's a bit of an overcorrection to rewrite or recast historically white characters as brown. That character with its newfound color will always have the cloud hanging over them, that any success post-coloring is only due to the momentum gained before that character was given its color. I know that there is more than enough creativity and ingenuity in our communities to make new minority characters and allow for that character to have its own genuine, homegrown fan base and success. Then we also don't have to make a big deal that we love these colorful characters just because they're colorful, but because they're wonderfully written and wonderfully portrayed. And they just happen to be people of color, illustrating inherent goodness and values in mainstream media that doesn't always do this for folks who look like us. Likewise, I believe the overcorrection of LGBTQ plus content in entertainment media will slow once we stop noticing or making such a big deal about it. The complaints are the very reason why it persists as strongly as it does. The complaints highlight the hate that these people still receive and why those themes are being pushed so hard so other people can accept them. I also believe this is why some of it is being shown to minors. We've shown so much hate, so much propensity to hate in our generation, and such a refusal to change. They're trying to make sure that children understand that you may see someone that fits that description, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't respect their humanity. They're trying to avoid the hatred of our generation and the generations prior seeping into the next, and I get that. But I do also believe that we're dangerously close to the point where we may be pushing it to the youth a bit too hard and potentially influencing young people into areas that they may not have been interested in otherwise. I tend to think a child can be programmed to a different sexual preference or gender identity, and that those things are inherent to our character. But I have to admit, media is extremely powerful, always has been. So who knows? But it's also true that vape, tobacco, alcohol, firearm, condoms, birth control companies, and many others have been exposing children to these ideas before their parents would have liked for decades. If your disgust is not equal for those other companies that do the same, your real face is showing. By now you know that my focus is to dismantle divisive narratives, but it is worth asking the question, how could this possibly be a divisive narrative versus just righteous instruction against sin? So let me explain. When the masses stand as one, we are extremely powerful. I'd like to personally note that this eventuality is the vision that I believe Christ had when he stated that people would go on to accomplish greater works than he did. I think what he was referring to, specifically, was not miracles, but taking this planet and its population from third to fourth density. In other words, making a heavenly kingdom on earth. And by heavenly, it's loving, unified, and highly conscious. As I've also stated, I believe the last time we were close to that goal, action was taken at the Tower of Babel. The primary reason strategies are deployed to cause division is because the powers that be know that the unification of the masses weakens the power structure and the control they have fattened themselves on. The power structure would always opt for something that divides the people rather than allow the masses more empowerment. They want an obedient, docile, impoverished, and divided public as a status quo. A strategy to maintain the status quo for the maximum possible duration has to be multifaceted, very forward-thinking, and extremely intelligent. Here is just one example of such a strategy. Conscious evolution brings unity and empowerment to the masses. Empowerment helps us regain control over our story, our memories, our resources, and increases the awareness of past life preferences. But it also disrupts the status quo. There would be a need to deploy mechanisms designed for the late stages of conscious evolution to cause as much resistance to unification as possible. One such mechanism was to encode religious texts with the verbiage to resist and detest one of the main side effects of conscious evolution, the recalling of past life preferences. This essentially resulted in creating one more hurdle. That right as we're getting close to the finish line, throw up one more thing that's going to cause so much division and hatred that it's going to take substantial time and effort to discuss, to study, and to reflect before we realize that this is not something that a loving Creator would want for us, and start to correct our path. Knowing that this eventuality is going to take place, all they are interested in doing is prolonging the division as long as possible. Before we wrap up this topic of reincarnation, we'll look at a couple passages in Luke 18 and Mark 9, where Jesus tells the disciples, "Suffer little children to come unto me and forbid them not. And whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receives me, and whoever shall receive me receives not me, but him that sent me." So without the threat of a single life that ends with you living out eternity in heaven or hell, we are also free to revisit why Jesus showed the mercy and the patience he did with the sinners and publicans and the adulterers, the thieving, and the murderers. His endearment to his disciples to not keep the children from getting to him also stands as meaningful statements regarding those who are spiritually young or with young souls. These spiritual children can be identified as those who prefer play to work, who indulge in their lusts constantly, and maybe seem to find little value in anything else in this life but pleasure and enjoyment. A person who might be called sinful is really a third density soul who is very young and maybe hasn't reached the maturity of another. Do you despise children who want to play with imaginary friends, dolls, action figures, or play make-believe? For the vast majority of the population, the answer is no. We admire and we value their innocence, their vigor for life, their adventurous nature, all the while knowing that as they age and they mature, they will gain an understanding and value of the same things we find valuable as adults. They will calm down, they will plant roots, they will make better decisions, and take on actual responsibilities. And the same is true here. I do believe that Jesus' instruction here is to treat those young souls the same as we do those young in the physical. And I think this is what he demonstrated with the woman taken in the act of adultery, the man crucified with him, and many others. Love them, help them, encourage them, teach them, but don't force them, judge them, or condemn them. We are to receive and suffer the children, being mindful that we were once the very same. Time has given us more maturity. In much the same way they will find themselves when they reach the same age. We should no more want to cut them off or chastise them for being young than we would have wanted someone to chastise us simply for being young. However, we should provide them good examples of what maturity looks like, so they hopefully have the right mindset as their aspirational goal. To be clear, in my personal opinion, this does also not mean let the dangerous roam free and continues to do harm to others. They should be restrained from hurting others until they learn and demonstrate those lessons. Maybe not seeing freedom until the next lifetime, if need be. Let's drop the negative reactions and the hateful words we picked up from our Abrahamic scriptures that we've learned from a ruling class who wanted us breeding like livestock to increase their workforce and their energy sources. And let's lead with love. Accept people as they are. Listen when they tell you what it's like to be them. And instead of thinking that they're a spiritual threat, consider that this is the effect of the earth and its inhabitants becoming ready to enter into the next phase of our existence and our consciousness. And let's move into it. To loosely quote the law of one, look at your fellow human. See the Creator. Look in the mirror. See the Creator. Look at everything around you and see the Creator. All is one. The one is all. Be well. Hey, thanks for watching our video and sharing with us one of your most important resources, your time. Continue to seek truth, reclaim your knowledge, your existence, and your reality. And you already know how this works. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want to help this channel work towards a better future. But most importantly, I hope this channel has helped you. Take care.